Let's take a journey back to the classic era of gaming by revisiting a title that holds a special place in many childhood memories. Desert Falcon for the Atari 2600. Sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, joystick in hand, it was easy to become utterly absorbed by this blocky adventure across ancient sands. But the real question is, was Desert Falcon truly as captivating as remembered, or have fond memories been coloured by nostalgia? It's time to fire up the Atari and find out whether this retro relic still stands tall in the modern era, or if the magic was all in the mind's eye.
Invented the technology to bring it home.
Before we get started, it's worth mentioning that I'll be playing Desert Falcon on a modern Atari 2600 Plus console. Rather than using the original joystick, I've opted for a Sega Mega Drive controller for a bit of extra comfort and precision. Oh, and I had to get one of these adapters to get it to work on the retro console too.
Son of a bitch.
Funny how the old and new have to cooperate just to enjoy a slice of gaming history.
What's the matter?
First, a bit of background. Released in 1987 near the end of the Atari 2600's commercial life, Desert Falcon was designed by Bob Polaro, the same developer behind legendary titles like Pitfall and Skee-Ball. While the golden age of Atari was already winding down, Desert Falcon sought to set itself apart with a unique isometric perspective, a rarity for the system. The player takes the role of a mysterious, blocky falcon soaring over the Egyptian desert, navigating pyramids, collecting treasures, and dodging a parade of mythological foes. The aim? Accumulate points, amass treasures, and stay alive as long as possible in an endless, looping trek through the sands. Conceptually, it was a bold attempt to bring a sense of adventure and exploration to the Atari's famously limited hardware. But how well did it achieve that? And does that sense of adventure endure today? When you're a child, the simplest things can feel magical. The first time Desert Falcon powered on, the Egyptian theme, the promise of hidden treasures, and the sheer novelty of controlling a falcon were enough to spark the imagination. Siblings would gather round, taking turns, competing for high scores, and weaving stories about the treasures to collect. Desert Falcon stood out for its sense of journey. Each pyramid felt like an unexplored frontier, and each round brought new surprises. The blocky graphics and limited sound effects didn't matter. In fact, they added to the charm, leaving much to the imagination. But as is often the case, nostalgia can be deceptive. Is the game truly a hidden gem, or was it all seen through rose-tinted glasses? Desert Falcon has now been revisited, this time on the Atari 2600 Plus. Using the Sega Mega Drive controller actually makes the controls feel a bit more refined, and the whole experience is smoother than wrestling with the original stick. That little adapter, honestly, it's a lifesaver for mixing retro and modern gear. It's oddly satisfying to see the classic console accept a controller from a different era, all thanks to a nifty little piece of plastic. The familiar chiptune intro kicks in, and old memories come flooding back. However, with a more critical, modern eye, some things stand out that a childhood self would never have noticed. The visuals in Desert Falcon were ambitious for the Atari 2600. The isometric perspective is a technical feat, giving the illusion of depth and movement as the Falcon glides over pyramids and deserts. Yet, by today's standards, it is a chunky, flickering mosaic of browns and yellows, with enemies and treasures sometimes blending into the background. Sound design is equally minimalist. The Atari's famous bleeps and bloops are on full display. There's a catchy little jingle when starting a new game, and a handful of sound effects for collecting treasures, flapping wings, and colliding with obstacles. It's charming, but after a while it can become repetitive or even a touch grating to modern ears. Despite these limitations, there's a certain warmth to the presentation. The simplicity leaves room for the imagination to fill in the gaps, something that modern games, with their cinematic realism, rarely allow. At its core, Desert Falcon is straightforward. The player controls the Falcon with the joystick, or in this case the Mega Drive pad, moving in all directions across the scrolling landscape. The main objective is to avoid obstacles, cacti, sphinxes, enemy birds, while collecting treasures scattered across the desert. The gameplay loop is classic arcade: survive as long as possible, rack up a high score, and repeat. The further one gets, the faster and more challenging the game becomes. There are bonus points for collecting certain sets of treasures, and special powers can be earned by collecting specific hieroglyphs in a particular order, a clever addition for its time, adding a layer of strategy and replay value. For all its simplicity, the controls can feel stiff and unforgiving by today's standards. Using the Mega Drive controller, though, offers a slight improvement in responsiveness, but input lag and collision detection are still very much of their era. Sometimes it feels like fighting the hardware as much as the enemies. Still, there's a certain satisfaction in mastering these quirks, a reminder that back then you had to work with what was available. One thing that stands out about Desert Falcon is its old-school difficulty. The game doesn't hold your hand. There are no save points, no continues, no in-game tutorials. Make a mistake and it's game over. You start from scratch. To a younger self, this was just the way things worked. But coming back as an adult gamer, used to checkpoints and forgiving difficulty curves, it's a shock to the system. Yet, there's something to be said for the sense of accomplishment when finally beating a high score. Each run is a mini-adventure, and every improvement feels earned. Does Desert Falcon live up to those fond childhood memories? It's complicated. On the one hand, the game's earnestness and charm still shine through. There's magic in its simplicity, in the way it invites players to imagine grand adventures with just a handful of pixels and sound effects. On the other hand, some of the magic has faded. Modern sensibilities highlight the clunky controls, the repetitive soundtrack, and the limited variety of enemies and environments. It's undeniably dated, and newcomers might find it more frustrating than entertaining. But perhaps that's what makes it special. Not every old game has to be a timeless classic. Sometimes it's enough that it made you feel something, even if you view it differently as an adult. Should Desert Falcon be played today? For retro gaming fans, or anyone who grew up with the Atari 2600, it's worth dusting off the old console, or the new Atari 2600 Plus, or firing up an emulator for a trip down memory lane. There's a unique joy in experiencing these early games, the foundation stones of modern gaming. For newcomers, especially those accustomed to the polish and depth of current titles, Desert Falcon might feel more like a curiosity than a must-play. Yet, given the chance, its earnestness and simplicity may still draw some in. While Desert Falcon never reached the household name status of Pitfall or Space Invaders, its influence can be seen in later games that blend action, exploration, and mythological themes. It's a reminder of a time when developers took risks within severe technical limits, crafting experiences that were as much about imagination as what appeared on screen. In some respects, the DNA of Desert Falcon lives on in indie games today. Titles that embrace simple mechanics and retro aesthetics to recapture that sense of unfiltered fun. Now, the all-important review score. Taking everything into account, the joy of nostalgia, the technical ambition, the dated mechanics, and the place it holds in gaming history, Desert Falcon receives a respectable 6.5 out of 10. Is it a masterpiece? Not quite. But it's a fascinating artifact, and for the right player, it's still a blast to revisit. Desert Falcon didn't just nest on the Atari 2600, it also took flight on the more advanced Atari 7800. The 7800 version stands apart thanks to its significantly enhanced visuals and improved gameplay performance. With crisper, more colourful graphics, smoother animation, and a noticeably more responsive control scheme, the 7800 edition leverages the hardware to deliver a richer experience. The environments feel more dynamic, and the Falcon itself is rendered in greater detail, inviting players to immerse themselves further in the mythological desert setting. Despite these technical advancements, the core of Desert Falcon remains familiar. The thrill of darting amongst pyramids, collecting treasures, and dodging ancient threats. The gameplay loop is intact, yet the polish and presentation help the action shine a bit brighter, making the 7800 port a more accessible entry point for newcomers and a gratifying upgrade for returning fans. For those seeking the most refined version of Desert Falcon, the 7800 release is the clear winner. It manages to preserve the game's nostalgic charm while adding enough improvements to feel fresh. Weighing these upgrades, the Atari 7800 Desert Falcon earns a score of 7 out of 10, an incremental but meaningful leap that highlights how classic games can evolve with newer technology while staying true to their original spirit. So, was Desert Falcon simply seen through rose-tinted glasses? Perhaps, just a little. Yet, revisiting it brings back a flood of memories, both good and bad. It may not meet every standard of modern gaming, but it remains a fascinating snapshot of a different era. A time when a child, a joystick, and a blocky Falcon were enough to spark an afternoon of adventure. Thank you for joining in this journey through the sands of time. If you enjoyed this review, please hit that like button, subscribe for more retro and modern game insights, and share your own memories of Desert Falcon or other childhood favourites in the comments below. My next video will be the top 10 best-selling games for the Microsoft Xbox One. Until next time, keep playing and keep the nostalgia alive. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this retro games review. Here are a couple of suggestions to watch next, and I will see you in the next video.